Hi, I'm April Rozzo, one of the registered dietitians with Florida Cancer Specialists and Research Institute. Thank you for joining us for this special holiday edition of our virtual wellness teaching kitchen. Today we are making pea and pesto risotto, which is super great for a holiday dinner, potluck, family gatherings. The nice thing about risotto is that a lot of love goes into it. So typically with risotto, you do a lot of stirring at the stove top, which doesn't sound great when you're preparing multiple holiday dishes. But the recipe that I'm gonna show you today is a cheat version. So this is how we can do risotto a little quicker, a little more hands-off, and it looks amazing. Like it's kind of a showstopper. People will think that you spent hours preparing it, and it really doesn't take that long. It's also great for vegetarian dishes. There's no meat going into this risotto dish. We're getting protein from other sources. So you can add meat, you can add seafood, but you don't have to. It can stand alone. So then you can serve it as a side, as a main. You have lots of options with this dish. So the first thing that we're gonna do is get some onion chopped up. The recipe only calls for about a half cup of onion. So my onions were pretty large. I'm only using half of an onion. If you happen to have a smaller yellow onion, you can use the whole thing. But about a half cup-ish is gonna go into that dish. So we're just gonna get this chopped up, okay, to cook everything. If you do not have a Dutch oven, it's totally okay. You can use just a large, kind of deep saucepan to cook everything in. You want that saucepan to be oven safe. So the beauty of the Dutch oven is that it can go from stovetop to oven to tabletop, all in one. But again, if you don't have that, we're just looking for a saucepan that you can put in the oven, because we're gonna start everything on the stovetop and then it's gonna finish cooking in the oven, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and get this Dutch oven heated up. Crank that to high. We want a little bit of olive oil in the Dutch oven, so about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So I'm gonna give a couple splashes in there, okay? And then while that's heating, I just want to tell you, so this is a rice dish. If you've never heard of risotto before, risotto is a creamy rice. And the reason it's creamy, most of the time you stand at the stovetop and you cook it slowly. So you add a little bit of liquid, usually broth, some kind of broth, and then you stir it until the rice absorbs all that liquid. And then you add a little more liquid and stir until it absorbs, and then a little more liquid and stir until it absorbs. And you do that for about 20 or 25 minutes until the rice gets really creamy. So you want what's called arborio rice, okay? It's a short grain rice. There's short grain, medium grain, long grain. This short grain rice is really starchy. So as you're stirring it on the stove and slowly adding that liquid, the rice is releasing that starch, and that's how you get that creamy dish, okay? So like I said, we're gonna cheat a little bit and do it in the oven. It's still going to be creamy. It's still going to be delicious risotto. It's not totally traditional. It's not quite as creamy as regular risotto, but this is a great way to have the flavor, to have the wow factor without having to stand at the stove for 20 or 25 minutes, okay? This will not work with long grain rice. Like if you try to just cook your regular brown rice this way, it won't come out the same. But there are certainly other grains that you can use, like pearl barley, to get the same effect as risotto if you don't have the arborio rice. Okay, so now that this is heating up, we want kind of medium-high heat. We're gonna go ahead and add our onions to the Dutch oven here. Okay. Now we are gonna cook this until the onion starts to soften, starts to get a little translucent, about 3 minutes. All right. And then we're gonna add some garlic to it, okay? So this is a kind of a step-by-step process here. If you have joined me before, you have heard me talk about garlic before. A lot of recipes call for adding onion and garlic together, all up front, all in one step. I never do that. I hate doing it that way because the garlic is diced up, it's minced up so tiny that it's gonna burn. On medium-high heat for 3 minutes like that, this garlic is just gonna start to burn, and then it tastes bitter, and nobody wants that in their dish. So I always start with the onion. I let it cook for a while. We want it, you know, again, about 3 minutes it takes for this onion to start to soften and get translucent. Okay. And then we're gonna add the garlic. I've also got over here, so when you're kind of getting all your ingredients together for this recipe, I've got some vegetable broth. You can use chicken broth, you can use beef broth. I'm using the vegetable broth to keep it vegetarian. It adds a ton of flavor. I don't cook rice with water because the broth adds more flavor to it. If you can find low sodium broth, that's better, that's great. I don't have low sodium broth today. I'm just using regular broth. So you'll notice in this recipe, there's no added salt anywhere because the ingredients going in are already so salty. The broth has, you know, the full amount of sodium. It's not low sodium broth. The pesto that we're gonna use at the end has salt and Parmesan cheese in it. We're adding some extra Parmesan cheese. And Parmesan is a really salty cheese. So there's so much flavor going into this dish that there is no reason you should need to add any more salt to it, okay? So we're just getting our onions cooked down. And you can see they're starting to soften, they're starting to get a little translucent in color. So now I'm gonna go ahead and add my garlic, about 2 cloves of garlic, okay? Now, if I was not adding pesto at the end, I may put 3 or 4 cloves of garlic in this recipe. But the pesto itself, if you're not familiar with pesto, if you've never used pesto, it's primarily a sauce. And it's made from basil, garlic, pine nuts, Parmesan cheese, a little bit of olive oil, lemon juice, and it all goes in a blender and gets pureed together. So rather than make my own pesto, you can go to Publix, you can go to the grocery store and buy a basil plant if you want to, or if you're growing it on your patio. I am fresh out of fresh basil. So rather than buy all those ingredients, I'm gonna make my life easy and I'm just using store-bought pesto this time around, okay? So again, corners to cut to make your life easy at the holidays. You're probably preparing multiple dishes. This is a great way to get that done without being overworked, okay? So once the garlic is fragrant, about a minute, you'll start to smell it. We wanna go ahead and add a cup of that arborio rice, uncooked, okay? It's gonna cook in the dish. So we're just gonna add that straight to the pan. And you want to give this a good stir. We're gonna cook this for another minute or 2, but you want that rice to start to get toasted. You want it coated in the olive oil before we go any further, okay? So just make sure that all of that rice gets stirred and mixed in, that it's coated with the oil, that it's starting to toast. And we're gonna let that go for a couple more minutes. All right. And this is about as much work as we're gonna do on the stove top. I know you're probably watching this thinking, April, you told me this was hands off. It was supposed to go in the oven. How is this easier? Because this is only the first stage. We spent maybe 5 minutes on the stove top, and the other 20 to 25 minutes is going to be in the oven. Whereas traditional risotto, it would be a full 25 to 30 minutes standing at the stove top, stirring it, tending to it. So this allows you a good 20 to 25 minutes of hands off that you can be doing other things while it cooks, okay? All right, so once that rice is a little bit toasted, we are gonna add 3.5 cups of broth, okay? And I'm just gonna give it a quick stir, make sure it's all kind of mixed together. Pour that straight in. Okay, and then we're gonna put the lid on this Dutch oven and put the whole thing in the oven. Okay, so that goes on there. Grab the oven mitts. Okay, if you do have a Dutch oven, you know how heavy they are, so please be careful. In the oven. Now that is gonna cook for about 20 minutes, okay? While it's cooking, you can prep your other ingredients. I've got some peas, green peas, 2 cups. I just bought a bag of frozen peas and thawed them out, okay? That's what we're gonna use when it comes out of the oven. The pesto is gonna go into it also when it comes out of the oven. The pine nuts and a little bit of Parmesan cheese we're setting aside along with some lemon for finishing it, okay, when it is totally finished out of the oven. But we're gonna go ahead and get that lemon prepped. Everything else is ready to go. So what I need is the zest of a lemon, okay? And then once I've got this lemon zested, we want the juice just from half. So juice from half a lemon, zest from the whole lemon, okay? All right. Everything else is ready. Like I said, we've got our store-bought pesto. So most of this is going in after that 20 minutes, okay, when the risotto comes out of the oven. And so now we wait. Okay, so the risotto has been in the oven for about 20 minutes. We're gonna pull it out and we're gonna add some green peas. So I mentioned earlier that this recipe is vegetarian and it already has a plant-based protein in it. That's the green peas. So peas are actually a really good source of protein. So you can see the rice has not fully absorbed the broth yet. That's still pretty brothy. We're gonna add the peas and go ahead and stir them in, okay? And then this is gonna go back in the oven for another 5 minutes or so, okay? So just get that all mixed in, and then we're gonna pop this right back in the oven. When it's done, when it completely is baked and out of the oven, we're gonna add the rest of our ingredients, okay? So back in the oven it goes, and another 5 or 10 minutes. So we've got everything out of the oven, we've got the risotto out. It actually stayed in a little bit longer than 5 minutes because I didn't have the vegetable broth at a boil when I added it to the risotto before the whole thing went in the oven. So all told, it was probably in the oven for 30 to 40 minutes instead of 20 minutes. You can make that shorter by when you add the chicken or vegetable broth into the risotto on the stovetop, bring all of that to a boil, and then put everything in the oven, and it'll go much faster. Then it won't have that longer cooking time in the oven. But it's done, it's out of the oven. We're gonna add the rest of our ingredients. So that zest of a lemon, okay? We're throwing that in. We've got our pesto that we're gonna throw in, and that juice of half a lemon. So I'm just gonna squeeze this straight in, okay? A couple of seeds fell in, I'm gonna pick those out. Nobody needs lemon seeds in their risotto, right? But just squeeze that juice in there. That lemon juice just helps bring a little brightness to the dish. Not all pestos have lemon juice in them, and so adding that little bit of lemon juice when it comes out of the oven really helps with the flavor. This is a little bit more than half a cup, so I'm not gonna use this whole container, but about a half cup of pesto, okay? Totally to your liking. Add a little bit, taste it, add a little more, whatever tastes good to you, okay? Get that out of the way. We are also gonna add a 1/4 cup of grated or shredded Parmesan cheese. And I've got a little bit more reserved for serving, okay? And then we're gonna add just a tablespoon of butter. And yes, I'm using real butter. It's not a lot. This serves 5 people and it's only a tablespoon. But that little bit of butter does help the creaminess of the risotto since we cheated in making it. And so we're just gonna give this a nice stir, okay? I can smell the garlic and the basil and the Parmesan. It's so good. And again, it's vegetarian. It still can be a main dish because the peas are adding all of that great protein to it. It can be a side dish if you're at a holiday potluck dinner. So if it's just a smaller side dish, it serves more like 8 to 10 people. But yeah, either way. So you can see how creamy this is, right? It makes such a great dish. So now I'm gonna scoop some out so that we have a serving, okay? I'm just gonna put a little bit on a plate here. All right. And we're gonna use that little bit of extra Parmesan cheese, not the whole 2 tablespoons. This is for like 4 people, but you just wanna top it with a little sprinkling of Parmesan and some toasted pine nuts, just to make it look really pretty and give it that nice crunch, okay? And I did those toasted pine nuts ahead of time so that all you have to do is top it at the end. And we have this beautiful pesto pea risotto for the holidays. So thank you guys so much for tuning in again. And we hope to see you back for our next edition in February. Thanks, everybody.